They brought the deserter to me in cuffs welded shut. 4 troopers hauled him through the chapel bay and dragged him to the devotional plate set into the floor. The plate had taken so many rounds over the campaign that the saint's face was mostly gone. Only the halo still showed, gouged and grey, ringed by stains that never faded no matter how often I ordered the bay scrubbed. The deserter's boots streaked mud and dried blood across that halo. His armour still held the sharp corners it had left the foundry with. Someone had smeared a crude saint symbol on his chest in white grease, the edges blurred by rough hands. His helmet was missing. Damp curls clung to his scalp. His eyes tracked the room, then locked on me. "Chaplain!" he rasped. I set the Book of War Rites on the lectern and opened it to the execution page, more for form than need. The words already lived in my mouth. My hands knew the gestures without ink. Name for the record. Radek Mott, 3rd Assault Company. His gaze flicked toward the token rack along the wall. You have my file. I do. He'd slipped toward the maintenance shafts during a lull in the bombardment, aiming for the rear bunkers. Sergeant Stross's squad had caught him before he reached the blast door, half delirious, babbling about something wearing his squad mates like suits. Stross stood near the rear of the chapel, helmet under one arm, jaw bristling with grey stubble. He watched with the flat focus of a man who'd seen too many plate executions. Around him, troopers shifted their weight. Armour scraped armour. No one spoke. I stepped down from the lectern. My boots rang hollow on the devotional plate. Confession first. Radek stared at my bolt pistol, then at the book. I already confessed to you this quarter. I unlatched the pistol and let him see the movement. This is for what you carry now. His Adam's apple jumped. He gave a short nod. On your knees. The troopers forced him down. I gestured, and they stepped back a pace. Enough room for me to move if something turned. Enough room for the plate to catch a body cleanly. Radek's knees hit iron. His welded cuffs gleamed bright against chipped black armor. I laid my palm on the crown of his head. His hair felt hot and damp. State your sins. I deserted. His voice cracked. Walked off 3rd Squad's position under fire. Tried to leave the regiment's perimeter. Why? He flinched under my hand. The thing on that line wasn't our usual enemy, Chaplain. There were guns, charges, orders. I let my fingers press down, just enough weight to remind him. You walked away from all of them. Why? It wore my brothers. His voice dropped to a ragged whisper. They didn't die right. Skin ripping, stretching. Then they just stood up again and moved wrong. Something climbed out of Torrens' throat and spread under his skin. I saw it. A shiver ran through the troopers behind me. Armor creaked. Someone cursed under his breath. I kept my hand on Radek's head. You saw a corruption. I saw something using them, using their memories, talking with their voices, but off, like a vox loop with pieces missing. It stared from behind Ral's eyes, something lodged inside him, and it spoke about details Ral never told anyone. You ran instead of reporting to command. I tried to raise it on Vox, static. I tried to tell Sergeant Riven. He laughed. Then his neck split open and... Enough! My tongue wanted to recoil from the picture he was painting. Fear is understandable, Radek Mott. Desertion still earns the same penalty, you know it. He bowed his head. I do. I still have to warn you. You have. I let my voice fall into the ritual cadence. The record will hold your words. His next breath trembled. Then make it clean, Chaplain. I drew the pistol. Grooves had been carved along its casing, each cut filled with brass. Tiny saints and tiny kneeling troopers marched in rows along the length. The weapon had passed from chaplain to chaplain for more generations than I wanted to count. Its weight sat in my grip like the spine of the book. I pressed the muzzle to the back of his head, just above the base of the skull. One trooper in the front row crossed himself. The others stared straight ahead. Through confession and compensation, I intoned. The faithful may be restored in death to the ranks of the pure. Do you accept this final rite? Radek shuddered once. I do. Be reclaimed. I squeezed the trigger. The bolt round punched through with a thunderous crack. His body jerked. Blood splattered across the devotional plate, my boots, the worn halo. Troopers flinched. A few turned away for a heartbeat. Then Radek moved again. For a moment I took it as reflex, nerves firing after impact. Then his back arched past the range bone should allow. The cuffed hands fought the welded bond with such force that metal squealed. His torso heaved and bulged. I stepped back, pistol up. Something pushed under the skin of his neck, as if a fist slid along a leather glove from inside. The entry wound gaped, then sealed from within. Flesh closed, smooth and tight. Blood seeped out, but the edges no longer tore. They puckered, then flattened into a wrong, polished finish. Several troopers swore. One stumbled into another, clacking helmets. Radek's head lifted. The round should have obliterated his head. Damage showed, but his spine no longer lined up with his shoulders. His eyes found me. For a heartbeat, they looked like the eyes I'd seen in confession. Then his focus shifted past me, unblinking, as if matching some point behind my skull. Interesting medium, he murmured. The mouth belonged to Radek. The voice did not. It carried a layered cadence, as though two speakers shared one throat and took turns within a breath. My finger tightened on the trigger. Instinct demanded I fire. I held my hand. What are you? Radek's head rotated farther than vertebrae liked. Muscles bunched along his shoulders, tendons standing out like cables. The cuffed hands twisted. For a moment I thought the wrists might slide free with bones unspooling, but the welds held. Adaptation, the mouth answered. Survival pattern. You destroy flesh. This rewrites. The troopers behind me fell silent. Armor creaked in the stillness. You wrap yourself in us, I said. You wear our dead. Efficient. Memories useful. Language efficient. The mouth shaped my own sermon cadence. Faith structure interesting. My skin prickled. Radek's cheek bulged. A smear of grey pressed against the inside, then slid deeper. His lips pulled into a smile that almost matched one of mine from a battlefield benediction. You misunderstand, I told it. Faith isn't a structure. I fired. The round entered at the left temple and left through the right eye. Whatever lived inside him convulsed. For a breath, the skin of his face rippled as if choosing between shapes. Other features stirred beneath the surface. A pair of spare lips crawled across his cheek. A foreign brow surfaced along his jaw, then sank. I fired again into the base of the skull. Convulsions stopped. The body toppled forward onto the plate. Flesh slumped back into something that resembled a man, though the angle of neck to shoulders would never look trustworthy again. Silence hung over the chapel bay. Troopers watched me, waiting for a sermon, an explanation, any frame that could hold what they'd just seen. I looked to Stross. His knuckles whitened on his helmet. His gaze met mine. No panic, just hard questions. He had a squad to keep alive. I had souls. We face an infiltrator, I announced. Whatever entered Radek Mott does not travel alone. It copies, it adapts, it speaks in our voices with our memories. Mutters rose, then dropped as I lifted the pistol. This bunker seals until I open it, I went on. Doors stay shut. Movement between compartments only under authorization. We verify every man inside these walls by right and by observation. Until we do, every one of us counts as suspect. Kesh, the demolitions man, let out an ugly laugh. We're already dead then. I met his eyes until he looked away. Stern, young and bright-eyed, stepped to the plate's edge. Radek's body lay between us. Whatever that thing was, Chaplain, the Creed gave us tools for this. You give the orders, we follow. No hesitation. He glanced down at Radek's ruined skull. This proves it. We were right to keep the rights. The Saints gave us weapons for this. We have tools, I said. We'll adjust them. Stross cleared his throat. Chaplain, orders from Upchain. First, we seal. I holstered the pistol. Then we listen. Stross nodded once. You heard him. Barricades. Sappers. With me. Chip, get to the Vox gallery and pull every transmission on Xenos infiltration and flesh corruption in this sector. Chip, thin and pale behind his helmet, turned to go. His hand drifted toward the icon at his throat, stopped halfway, dropped again. He disappeared into the corridor. I looked down at Radek, at the angles no human spine should hold, and knew whatever had stared through his eyes still occupied this bunker. Whether lodged in a host or smeared in fluids already under our boots, I couldn't yet tell. The chapel bay smelled of nothing. That absence felt wrong, but I had no time for comfort. I'll need the medici, I told Stross, and the steadiest men you can spare. The rites of verification were written for simpler plagues. We'll have to compose new verses as we go. Stross's mouth twisted. Steady men run short down here, Chaplain. Bring whoever still listens. He nodded and turned to bark orders. I closed Radek's eyes with 2 fingers, more for myself than for him, and began planning the first purge. The outer blast doors ground shut within the hour. Sappers fused the manual overrides. Razor wire wreaths unfurled across inner corridors. Hammer blows on metal rolled through the main hall like a slow heartbeat. I stood in the central barracks as the last section straggled back from the trenches. Mud caked their greaves. Dried flecks clung to armor. Helmets came off. Men wiped their faces with forearms, smearing new dirt over old. Frontline holds, Stross reported. Barely. Enemy armor eased up, but our line's thin. Cut us off from resupply and we bleed dry. No ammo, no rations. The blockade already has us by the throat, I answered. Command's been starving us for days. Which is why those supply tunnels mattered. His tone stayed flat, iron beneath. You just sealed them. Anyone walking those tunnels now walks through unverified dark, I said. You saw Radek. I saw a body move in ways it shouldn't. Stross looked over his squad. You want me to tell these men they're prisoners, that they don't step beyond these walls unless you stamp them pure. That's exactly what I want you to tell them. He breathed out through his nose. You carry the seal, I carry the squad. We'll both spend what we have down here. Then we spend it with care. Stern lingered near the center of the barracks, helmet under his arm, rosary chain wrapped through his fingers. Tiny cuts on his armor plates had been filled with white ink, tally marks of kills and near deaths. The chain clicked in a steady rhythm. When do we start? He asked. Now. I shook my head before he could step closer. But not with you. We start with men who handle wounds and messages. Vox, Medicae, then section leaders, then the rest, by squads. Kesh snorted from a bunk, forearms on his knees. Always officers and specialists first, even in a purge. This isn't a witch hunt, I said. We're tracking something that wears men, talks like them, uses their memories and treats my sermons like scaffolds to climb. Several troopers glanced toward the chapel. What did it say exactly? Kesh asked. It called us interesting. I met his eyes. You'll hear it again. I won't repeat every phrase. Some things stay in my keeping. He rolled a shoulder. You keep the phrases. We drag ammo crates and bodies. Stross flicked a hand at him. Enough. Medicae first, I went on. Brands in the alcove? Stross nodded. Working through the wounded. I warned him you were coming. I need 2 troopers to assist. My gaze moved across the room. Stern, Kesh, with me. Kesh lifted his brows. Why me? You work with charges and wiring. You know how to read hidden strain in a line or plate. I want those eyes on this. He studied me a beat, then pushed to his feet. Fine. If the chaplain wants my expert opinion on bowls of blood, who am I to refuse? Stern shot him a look and fell in behind me. The Medicae alcove lay down a side corridor, past folded stretchers and storage lockers. The door stood open. Inside, Bran leaned over a pallet, hands inside the chest of a trooper, half covered by a sheet. Tools glittered on a tray. The trooper's eyes stared at nothing. Bran didn't look up when we entered. "If this is another one you want kept alive on hope and an empty kit, Chaplain, walk back out." "He's past hope," Kesh muttered, eyeing the open ribs. Bran grunted, tugged something stringy and dark free, dropped it into a bucket. Then he stripped off his gloves and turned. Hollow cheeks, brown hair shaved close at the sides, fine lines etched from eyes to nose by years of squinting at wounds in bad light. "What do you need?" he asked. "Your blood." He blinked once. "You pick your moments." "There's a corruption in the bunker," Stern cut in. "Something that wears men and lies in their voices. The chaplain blew the back of Radek's skull out and the body moved anyway. That thing crawls inside us. The rites will show it." Bran's gaze shifted to me. "That true, Ignatius?" "I put 2 rounds in his head," I replied. "Bone shouldn't hold through that. The wound sealed. Something used him as a shell. And you want to test me?" "You open men and close them again," I said. "If something wants access to flesh, the man with his hands already inside bodies makes an efficient host." He studied my face, then rolled up his sleeve. "Take it," he murmured. "If something rides me, I'd like to know before I cut any more troopers." I unrolled a field cloth and set a shallow metal bowl in its center. It had been a mess tin once. I'd carved scriptures along the rim myself and inlaid them with shavings from a reliquary frame. Improvised temple gear. War rarely waited for approvals. Stern drew a small vial from his satchel. The reagent shimmered faintly, catching light at odd angles. It had received its blessing when we left the last world. Doctrine claimed it reacted to heresy, corruption, certain Xenos taints. Experience claimed it sometimes did. Sometimes it sat inert. That was the trouble with miracles. 3 drops, I said. Stern uncapped the vial and let 3 fall. They spread into a thin, translucent film across the bowl. I took Bran's wrist. Palm. He turned his hand over without flinching. I nicked his skin with my bolter's cleaning blade, opening a narrow line. Blood welled. I held his hand over the bowl and let it fall into the reagent. We watched. Fluid swirled and mingled, shifting shade. I began the chant from the second book of rites, the one meant for recruits from contaminated zones. Stern answered by rote. Kesh stood with arms folded, eyes narrowed. The mixture settled into a dull, even red. No darker veins, no hardening, no strange glisten that doctrine promised. Bran let out a breath. That all. For now. I pressed cloth to his palm. You clear. Lucky you, Kesh murmured. I'd gotten used to you. Bran ignored him. His eyes stayed on the bowl. You're building this as you go. That reagent was blessed for a different purpose. Blessing binds, I said. The verse is named separation. That's what we need, to split faithful flesh from whatever crawled through Radek. You should open him, Bran said. I want a look at the thing that killed him after you killed him. I'll bring him once the first tests are done. He nodded. Then move fast. If it rides blood, time favors it. He turned back to his opened patient. As the sheet fell, I caught a glimpse of pale bone and muscle. On the way out, Kesh leaned close. What if the fluid's useless? What if that bowl just reflects what you already think? It might, I said. It's what we have. Men say that right before they blow a bridge. We worked through key personnel. Chip, Stross, squad leads. Cut, drip, watch, chant. Most bowls stayed quiet. Some showed faint swirls that might be nothing more than clotting. I let those pass, adding rote notes about hygiene and cuts, as if we were back on a training world. In the late watch, artillery thumps softened to a distant murmur. That's when we brought in Trooper Dervick. He walked stiff-backed, shoulders hunched, as if bracing for a strike. Sweat glistened along his hairline. His hands trembled when he unbuckled his gauntlet. "You know why you're here?" I asked. He nodded without looking up. "Sergeant said anyone who covered rear trench with Radek goes first." Stern narrowed his eyes. "You were on that line." "I was. I didn't run." "Then you have nothing to fear," Stern replied. Kesh let out breath through his nose. "I've heard that before." I set the bowl. Radiant. Cut. Dervik's blood came darker than Bran's, thicker. It fell in slow drops. I chanted. Stern responded. Dervik held his arm out, muscles taut. The mixture reacted before I reached the midway verse. A darker chord formed, winding through the fluid, knotting on itself like a living thread. Nodules bulged along its length, broke apart, rejoined. The surface rippled, as if something beneath pressed upward, searching for air. Stern inhaled sharply. "Corruption!" Dervik yanked his hand back. What is that?" Kesh's palm settled on his sidearm. I drew my pistol. "Trooper Dervik, present yourself at the plate." He stared at the bowl, then at me. "I feel fine. I'm fine. That mix is wrong. You saw Bran's bowl. That looked different. It has to be..." The fluid climbed the sides. The surface drew itself into a trembling mound reaching toward his hand. Dervik stumbled back. "I won't be warned by that thing," he stammered. "I won't. Shoot it. Spare me." "The host must fall," Stern urged. "You heard in the chapel. It speaks with his mouth. It pleads. It bargains." "Trooper," I said, "look at me." He did. "You were with Radek on that line. Did you see anything enter him?" His lips parted. For a long breath, he hovered on the edge of a lie. "I saw motion under his armor," he whispered, like something poured through his veins. Then he smiled. "Radek doesn't smile in the trench, Chaplain. He jokes in the barracks, he sulks, he curses, but under fire he just grinds through the drill. That grin in the trench felt wrong. It slid off his face when the charge blew close. Then the same face turned to me and I knew he'd gone. I ran." Kesh shifted. "You left him alone with that in him." "I thought if I could reach you..." The mass in the bowl shivered, then split again. Tendrils groped toward the rim. "We waste time," Stern snapped. He pulled his pistol and leveled it at Dervik. I stepped in, shoulder checking him aside. "This task stays with me," I reminded him. "Not you." Stern's grip whitened. "We know he's tainted. You heard him. He watched it take Radek. He ran. The right lays it bare." "The right shows agitation in his blood," I said. "It doesn't mark the hour the thing entered or how far along it runs. We might learn more with a living host." "Learn," Dervik repeated, voice thin. "That's one way to name it." His face had gone grey. "This thing copies us," I went on. "Every detail it gains, every test it sees, it will adjust. We can't meet adaptation with superstition. We need to know its path, its speed, where it nests." Stern's gaze burned. "And you keep it breathing." "For as long as we can hold the line," I answered. "Strapped down, watched, for knowledge." "That fluid tells you enough," he shot back. "You're braver with men than with monsters." "We're all making choices no instructor would recommend," I said. "This is mine." Kesh cleared his throat. "If you insist on keeping him, I can build a shaped charge under the pallet." Blast angled up. First sign he breaks restraint, we trigger. No more host. "That takes half the alcove," Stern protested. Kesh shrugged. "Stand farther away." Options weighed themselves against one another. Kill Dervik now and gain confirmation of one host, nothing more. Keep him and risk the bunker for a chance at insight. Radek's warping spine flickered in my mind. Interesting medium. "Bran won't like this," I muttered. "Bran usually does what's needed," Kesh said. "After he complains." I looked at Dervik. "Would you accept restraint for your brother's sake?" A laugh broke out of him, brittle as dry bone. "You're asking if I consent to being opened on a table?" "Yes." He stared at the bowl, where the mass still crawled, then back at me. If you shoot me now, I die with that thing inside. If Bran can cut it out. He grimaced. You won't let it walk around wearing my face. I won't. He closed his eyes, then strapped me down. Try to drag something useful out of this. If I start moving like Radek, end it. No sermon, just a bolt. You have my word. We took him to the alcove under guard. Bran didn't like the idea, but he did it. He strapped Dervik to a pallet with wide belts. Kesh slid his charge into place under the frame and wired the detonator. The activator sat in my pocket, cold and small. By the time we finished, sweat soaked through Dervik's undershirt. He stared at the ceiling, breath short and shallow. You'll have eyes on him at all times, I told Bran. If he feels anything crawling under his skin, he tells you. If you see anything move where it shouldn't, you shout. Dervik nodded without looking. On a side table, the bowl of reagent and blood trembled. A dark tendril crept over the rim, slid down the side and began inching across the metal. Bran snapped on a glove and slammed a jar over it. It shows preference, he muttered. Chooses direction. Burn it, Stern urged. Every sample's a textbook, Bran countered. That thing wants us ignorant, Stern growled. So does Command most days. Bran looked to me. You brought me a living host. Let me do the work. If he breaks, you've got your detonator. I touched the jar, feeling faint motion against the glass, then pushed the detonator deeper into my pocket. Do it, I said. Tell me what you learn. While Bran watched Dervik, we kept testing. Bowl, blood, chant. After Bran's warning, every clear sample felt suspect. Most still lay quiet. A few showed swirls I couldn't read. I stamped them clean, because the alternative was burning the bunker on shadows. Then we brought in Trooper Callan, older than most. Scar tissue knotted his jaw where a blast had taken half his beard. He offered his palm with the resignation of a man who'd already outlived his own luck. The reagent reacted like it had with Dervik. Fluid writhed. Red lines knotted into shapes that almost resembled letters from a script I didn't know. Tiny bubbles burst along those lines, spitting flecks onto the rim. My hand shifted toward my pistol. Callan watched without flinching. That's me. You and the hitchhiker, I said. He nodded once. Then we're finished. He turned toward the devotional plate. Stern's shoulders eased. He understands. Callan went to his knees without prompting and bowed his head. 4 campaigns, he murmured. Shot, burned, stepped on by armor. I expected a different exit. You leave with confession and compensation, I told him. Surrounded by brothers. He snorted. Brothers who'll remember that something crawled under my skin. Will remember a man who chose their safety over his fear, I said. His mouth twitched. Tell them I didn't cry. I will. I raised the pistol. The blast took the back of his skull. His body sagged. No wrong angles. No stolen voice. Just a dead man. Bran's autopsy later confirmed it. He opened Callan's skull and chest and found only human flesh. No mutable tissue. No cords of strange meat. Nothing. You killed a loyal man, Bran told me, arms red to the elbows, gloves slick. Fear and bad data. Same old combination. I killed him because the right showed a pattern, I said. Because if I'd spared him and he turned loose in this bunker. You don't know what that reagent really answers to, Bran cut in. You've bent liturgies in directions they were never meant to go. You're treating every ripple as a death sentence. I'm using the tools the Creed puts in my hands. Most of those tools were forged by men who never left a library. His mouth pulled tight. You brought me a living host to study, and I'm telling you, this test lies. It can mark a loyal man for death. That makes it as dangerous as whatever crawled through Radek. Do we own anything better? I asked. We have eyes, behavior, instinct, your memory of confessions, that's it. I looked at Callan's open skull. Bone and pale folds of brain, disturbingly ordinary. Guilt hardened inside my chest. "I can't keep men calm with instinct," I said. "I can't report to command that we're relying on my gut. They want rights, procedures, proof that we applied every trick in the book." "They want someone to blame when they drop fire on you," Bran replied. "They'll call it your misuse of the rights, not their decision to throw you into a foundry war with half-written doctrine." He peeled off his gloves. "Stand by this, Ignatius," he went on. "That bowl killed a loyal man. That makes it part of the problem." I walked out before I said something I'd have to record. The Vox gallery always felt cramped. With Chip hunched over the consoles, it shrank to a coffin. Static hissed from one receiver. Another spat clipped fragments. The main screen streamed text, riddled with interference. Sweat beaded at his temples. His lips moved, counting intervals under his breath. "You have something?" I asked. He jumped. "Chaplain, you're quiet." "That's the idea." He gave a quick, embarrassed smile. "Comms are wrecked on this level. Bombardment pulses foul half the relays. The blockade's forcing everything through overloaded amplifiers. I'm trying to sift for anything on infiltration." He nodded toward a side screen. Lines of text rolled past, half mangled. Fragments broke through. "Bunker 3-2 enacted full self-purge on suspicion of memetic. Survivors negative. Initiative commended. Chaplain on Foundry Line Delta reports entity resistant to standard reagent test. Awaiting revised doctrine. High Command Directive. Units encountering shape-adaptive Xenos infiltration authorized for total incineration if verification fails." "Self-purge," I repeated. "They sealed the bunker and vented plasma through the ducts," Chip said. "Vox cut 5 minutes later. Command filed it as initiative." Metal pooled on my tongue. Any mention of hosts that died slow. "Nothing. No one wants those details in the archive. They're more afraid of this going wide than they are of losing a few hundred troopers." He shuffled slates. "And our own traffic's gone strange." "How?" "Earlier, when I tried to ping Medici Command about contamination drills, the call dropped. I blamed the artillery. Now I'm less sure." He tapped one slate. "Some logs lost timestamps. Some entries shifted out of sequence. It looks like someone's been clipping or rearranging our queue." "You suspect tampering?" "Either someone's editing logs, or our systems are rotting in very selective ways." My eyes went to his hands, thin fingers stained with ink, a burn scar across the back of his left hand from an overload months ago. None of it meant anything against the possibility of another mind behind his eyes. "You put in cross-checks?" I asked. "I do now." He nodded at a handwritten list taped to the console frame. "Paper shadows of anything important. If a log vanishes, the paper complains." "Who can walk into this room?" "Me, you, Stross, any trooper who wants to lean in and shout at the screens, so most of them." "You're not helping your case." He lifted his hands. "If you suspect me, bring the bowl. I'll bleed into it myself. But if this thing can edit logs, it might not need my fingers. It might ride the power spikes and nest in the wiring." "The sample in Bran's jar stayed anchored," I said. "It crawled along surfaces. It didn't look ready to leap into an amplifier. And yet it learned how to move lips," Chip murmured. Static surged, then snapped into clarity. "Cardinal Marshal to all chaplains in industrial sectors." Calm voice, clipped, confident. "Reports confirm a shape-shifting Xenos entity capable of mimicking human form and retaining superficial memories. Vector may include blood, flesh, or both. Rights of verification fall under your authority. Apply any necessary force. Better to lose men than worlds. Any unit lacking proof of thorough verification will be cleansed from orbit. Marshal out." The channel dropped back to noise. Chip exhaled. "Clear enough." "They're throwing old rights at a new parasite with an orbital gun behind them," I said. "They trust you," Chip replied, brittle grin in place. "Every chaplain's dream." "Trust," I echoed. I thought of self-purges logged as initiative, of Callan's corpse. Trust sounded thin under orbital plasma. Keep dragging anything you can from other chaplains, I told him. Look for rites that worked or failed, or mention this thing adjusting. Assume it's listening. Assume it learns. He nodded. I will. And chaplain, this thing keeps pushing units into killing themselves. The rites might help it more than us. If that's true, I said, we'll need new rites. I turned to confessions. In quieter wars, confession brought the usual. Stolen rations, hidden bruises, doubts about orders, fists thrown in dark corners, thoughts of home that blunted focus. Now, every word carried the weight of infiltration. I slid open the confessional door in the chapel bay. The booth had been welded in when the bunker was first dug. One side for priest, one for trooper, grill between. Boots and fingernails had scarred the walls. Men had carved tiny marks into the frame over the years, a tally of vented burdens. Stern entered first. He knelt, helmet beside him, shoulders squared so hard they might crack. "Bless me, chaplain," he murmured. "I present my soul for inspection." The saint's witness. I settled onto my bench. "Speak." "I've fed anger toward my brothers," he said. "I've judged hesitation as weakness. I've thought of them as obstacles between me and glory. Glory. In the creed. In battle. In—" His voice lowered. "Your eyes. I want you to see I'm pure. That I don't flinch. You want approval," I said. "I want to be worthy." "Worthy of what?" "Of this." I heard his fingers brush the icon at his throat. "Of the stories they'll tell when this is over." "You expect stories?" I asked. "There have to be. Otherwise, what is all this for?" "Some of it's for survival," I said. "For keeping the men beside you alive long enough to reach their own endings." "That too." He hesitated. "Survival alone isn't faith. Faith means standing ready to die for something, accepting that your death keeps others pure." I watched the shape of his face through the grill. "Stern." "Yes." "If I told you the only way to keep your brothers safe from this thing was to kill half of them now, what would you do? Would you have reason?" "Assume I did. Assume the right demanded it." He didn't pause. "I'd obey. Even with doubt gnawing. I'd obey faster when doubt gnaws," he said. "Doubt is a tool the enemy likes. You'd kill them to prove faith. I'd kill them because you judged it necessary." He meant every word. No bravado, no play. "I absolve you of your anger," I said, "but understand this. Chasing my approval isn't the same as wanting your brothers alive. Weigh that before you pull a trigger in my name." A beat of silence. "Is that a warning?" he asked. "Counsel." He left with his shoulders still square. Kesh came next. He flopped onto the kneeler, armor clanking. "One more sin check coming up," he muttered. "You're not amusing," I told him. "That one on the list too." "You tell me." He rested his head against the grill. "Fine. I confess doubt. I confess boredom. I confess I miss the artillery when it stops, because at least then something happens. I confess I've been thinking about desertion." "You helped catch Radek," I reminded him. "Ran into him with a charge detonator in his fist," Kesh said. "He almost took the tunnel behind him. I respect the effort. That's not humor. I'm not laughing." Silence stretched. "You could have joined him," I said. "You didn't." "I'm good with explosives," he replied. "Feels ungrateful not to use that for the people who fed and armed me. Besides, where would I go? Trench, foundry, back to a transport that never arrives. Cages all the way down. At least here I know the wall thickness. You see the rights as walls. I see your rights as tools," he said. "Tools build walls, tear them or slip and take fingers with them. They don't guarantee anything. You think I don't know that?" "I think you've killed men with that bowl who only carried fear," he replied. "I saw Callan's face when he walked to the plate. He trusted you more than his own blood. Heavy trust. I carry it," I said. "I know." Metal tapped against the grill. That's why I'm here. Not for clean conscience, for reminder. You're a man with bad tools, not a saint with perfect sight. You're not the first to say so today. Good, he shifted. Remember, this box is just welded metal. Your book is just paper, and whatever war Radek doesn't care about either. I stared at the grill long after he left. The men split themselves without orders. Stern drew a knot of zealots. They watched each directive with bright eyes. They mirrored my gestures in miniature when I spoke, as if rehearsing later roles. They whispered suspicions about the way someone turned his head, or how somebody rubbed a scar. Kesh drifted toward the other end of the hall, where the cynical and exhausted gathered. Knives rasped against whetstones. Weapons came apart and went back together. Jokes ran about dying under my pistol before any Xenos ever reached them. The laughter stayed cold. Stross moved through both clusters, tamping down arguments before they grew teeth. The fight came anyway. I'd just stepped out of another round of tests when raised voices rolled from the barracks. Stern stood at the center of a rough ring, hand on his rifle. Opposite, Kesh and 3 others faced him, arms folded, expressions tightening. "We all bled into your bowl once," Kesh was saying. "If we do it again every time somebody twitches, you'll empty the bunker onto that plate." "That's the point," Stern shot back. "You heard the Cardinal. Better to lose men than worlds. Any doubt gets answered." "And who names doubt?" Kesh asked. "You." "I know when someone begs for retesting because he wants off latrine duty," Stern snapped. "I know when someone starts shrinking, flinching at prayers. I know when—" "No," I cut in, heads turned. "You don't name suspects," I said, walking into the ring. "Your job is a rifle, not a judgment seal." Stern squared his jaw. "With respect, Chaplain, one pair of eyes won't save us. The enemy imitates. It lies. It might already sit behind yours. So your answer is to test everyone twice a watch until this bunker runs out of veins," Kesh snorted. "If that's the cost," Stern answered, "we pay it." "You're hungry to pull the trigger on your brothers," I said. "I'm hungry to stop that thing crawling through us," he fired back. "If fear of the plate shakes confessions loose, the rites work." He stepped toward Kesh. "What are you so worried about, Sapper? Something's squirming under your fingernails." Kesh's hand flashed to his knife. For a second I thought he'd bury it under Stern's jaw. Instead he drove the blade into the table between them, hilt deep. The metal quivered. "I worry about believers with no brakes," Kesh snapped. "I watched Callan kneel because your bowl told him to. No flinch, no plea. He trusted you. He trusted the chaplain. Bran cut him open and found a loyal man. Your burn half to save half killed him. Forgive me if I'm not eager to take the same walk." Color flushed Stern's cheeks. "Call me idiot again and I'll drag you to that plate myself." "Try," Kesh said. Stross stepped between them. "Enough. Bunks. All of you. Weapons back in racks. No one draws steel inside these walls without the chaplain's word. You want to kill something, walk above and find an enemy line." "The enemy stands in this room," Stern insisted. "I'm looking at him," Kesh muttered. The air crowded with tension. Hands hovered over grips. "If anyone fires without my order," I said, "he'll kneel at the plate before the hour's out. I don't care which camp he thinks he belongs to. We have one squad, one bunker, one set of walls between us and the wastes." "You can't pretend some men aren't more vulnerable," Stern argued. "Those who doubt. Those who mock the rites." "Doubt can be part of faith," I said. "Blind repetition isn't devotion. You want to prove purity. Do it by holding the line when it actually matters, not by begging to shoot your own." Stern's gaze flicked to Stross, then back to me. "You're soft, Chaplain. That thing will turn your mercy into a knife. You're eager, Trooper. It'll turn your zeal into the same knife." We held each other's stare. He stepped back first, muscles rigid. Stross blew out a breath. "Back to racks. That's an order. Chaplain chooses the pace of rites, not you." Men peeled away. The room's noise dropped to mutters. I turned. The knife still quivered in the tabletop. Sleep had become rumor days ago. When it finally took me, it dragged me down fast. I dozed on my narrow bunk, half-dressed, book of rights under my pillow. Dreams tangled with memory. Radek's spine arcing, Callan's open skull, the reagent heaving like a living thing. A hand clamped over my mouth. I came awake reaching for the pistol under my blanket. Fingers found cloth, then skin, then the familiar grip. Easy, Chaplain. Breath in my ear, low. Kesh's rasp. He took his hand away. In the thin corridor light, his face hung over mine, eyes wide and wired. If this is a joke, I growled, pick another night. Somebody just tried to slip a blade into you. I shoved his arm aside and sat up. Explain. I woke to a shape moving past my bunk, he said. Soft steps, more priest than trooper, headed for your rack. I might have ignored it if I hadn't seen steel in his hand. Who? Couldn't see his face. Cloak, cowl, could have been stern, chip. Any panicked idiot who thinks killing you will calm the room. And you stopped him. I tried. He raised his arm. A fresh line of blood crossed his forearm. Caught the knife here when I grabbed him. He wrenched free and ran. Somebody opened a door down the hall and he slipped through. You're sure it was a man? I asked. He snorted. Look around, Chaplain. Fair. There were no women in this bunker. Why tell me before Stross? I asked. Because whoever wanted your throat will come again, he said. Stross will lock the barracks down and strip search everyone. That ends bloody. You needed to know someone decided the quickest way out of this is to take your hand off the lever. And you disagree. I like having you between me and the Cardinal, Kesh said. Faith makes you dangerous, but I can read you. I'd rather have you weigh my sins than let some scared trooper with a knife decide. I swung my feet to the floor. Wake Stross. Quietly. Tell him. No alarm. We watch. Kesh nodded and ghosted away. I sat in the dim for a while, listening to distant bombardment and the bunker's groans. Someone had tried to cut my throat. I couldn't tell whether that counted as assassination or attempted salvation. Bran called me near the end of the next watch. He met me at the alcove door, eyes ringed with fatigue. Bring your detonator, he said. You need to see this. Dervik lay strapped to the pallet. Sweat slicked his skin. Veins stood out dark along his arms and neck, branching in patterns that didn't match anything anatomical. New lines traced his jaw and swirled around his eyes, as if a second circulatory map had been sketched over him. His fingers flexed against the restraints. His chest rose in uneven motions, different ribs lagging behind the rest. Has he spoken? I asked. Not always with his own mouth, Bran replied. We stepped closer. Dervik's head turned. His eyes cracked open. Chaplain, he croaked. I'm here. No one mentioned the itch, he went on, like ants under the bones. His teeth clicked, his tongue flicked over cracked lips. That's his voice, Bran muttered. I know. How far along? I asked. Hard to mark, Bran said. Tissue under his skin keeps shifting. Some stays his, some doesn't. There's no clean border. If I cut now, I carve out both. If I wait, he becomes a framework the thing wears. So no neat line to follow. The thing's bright enough not to draw one just for us. Dervik gave a weak laugh with a rising, unnatural pitch. You talk about me like a specimen, he murmured. Yesterday, I was a man. What do you feel like now? I asked. He stared at the ceiling. Something between. His eyes sharpened for a heartbeat. If you're waiting for me to beg, you came late, he went on. I used those words when you strapped me down. I stepped closer. The veins along his neck pulsed in slow waves. You felt it enter you? I asked. Before the rite. Yes. Something moved under my skin in the trench, spread like heat that didn't burn. Then it settled. I blamed shock. Radek turned, smiled with a mouth that didn't belong on him, and I ran. His voice changed. Cowardice, the mouth observed. The cadence matched Radek's unnatural speech. My thumb brushed the detonator in my pocket. Who speaks now? I asked. Adaptation pattern, the mouth replied. Aggregate. The mind learning your language. You talk through my trooper. Through the host, through the colony. Your medic already told you he can't separate us cleanly. I didn't give you permission to use my tone. The lips smiled. You did when you cut. Curiosity feeds me. I kept my thumb clear of the stud. You're boxed, I told it. This bunker's sealed. Even if you wear every man here, you still face steel in the wastes at the door. You live inside steel, it replied. You move when distant voices command. You bend to words in a book. You already serve other riders. I add one more. You're a parasite. Every creed feeds on hosts. Its eyes glittered. I'm simply honest about surviving. Dervik's gaze flickered beneath the overlay. What do you want? I asked. Survival, expansion, new structures. This bunker ends in orbital fire. Your guns will scour you as soon as you disappoint them. You know about the guns. I know what I eat from you. Radek, others. The memory of your cardinal tasted like authority. Bran muttered. Wonderful. It digests propaganda. You're cornered, I said. The rights exposed you. I can blow this host apart and then purge every man you might have brushed. I can condemn this bunker to death, rather than let you slip into the wider front. Yes. The lips stretched further. Your law encourages that. Burn half to save half. Burn all to save the idea of purity. It smiled wider. You hesitate, it went on. You weigh, you kill, and then doubt. That makes you dangerous and useful. Useful how? Arrangement. The mouth moved with Dervik's face. Allow one host to leave. Certify this bunker pure. Send names upchain with your seal. I stay quiet in that single vessel. Leave the others untouched. You live. Your men leave this dead world. I find a war where my talents suit the scale. Bran barked an incredulous laugh. It wants transport. The host's eyes locked on me. You keep your flock. Your church records a successful purification. I escape my cage. No more self-purges. No more misread bowls. Elegant. You expect me to accept that? I expect you to remember who defines purity, it said. You wear the seal. You choose, not the reagent, not the cardinal. You. Dervik's eyes pleaded behind the thing's words. Veins bulged along his neck. Restraints creaked. If you sit on your hands, the thing went on, the ships above eventually decide you failed. They scour this bunker. Your rights spill blood for nothing. I drift as dust with you. My thumb slid toward the detonator. Bran watched my hand. I won't take your trade, I told it. Can't, it echoed. Or refuse. I refuse. I kept my voice calm. Any host I escort out with you inside becomes a weapon I unleashed. You already unleash men as weapons each dawn, it said. At least I know my nature. Dervik's back arched. Bones popped. The palate groaned. Bran snatched a syringe. He's slipping. Elsewhere, the thing continued through those straining lips. Chaplains burn squads because uncertainty frightens them. Your restraint offers another pattern. You could guide a new kind of host, one that holds both faith and adaptation. Its eyes found mine. You could be the first to understand me instead of trying to erase me, it finished. I pressed the detonator. The shaped charge cracked the air. The blast hurled gore against the walls in a tight cone. The plate beneath the pallet focused force upward. Straps snapped. Flesh and bone turned to fragments. Bran staggered back, arms up. Heat spattered my cheek. When the ringing faded, the remains on the pallet bore no human outline, just torn matter. Bits twitched. Bran kicked the mass into the crater and emptied a magazine into it. That one was for Dervik, he muttered. I wiped my face and slipped the detonator back into my pocket. You didn't entertain its bargain, Bran said. I did, I answered. Then I weighed the bait. On what scale? It tried to flatter me. I looked at the crater. That alone made the offer poisonous. He gave a dry laugh. It misjudged you. Maybe not entirely, I said. It will speak again, he warned, through another mouth, another set of lips. I know. When detonators run out, he added. What then? I improvise, I said. We received the ultimatum 2 watches later. Chip dragged me to the gallery, eyes wide. They dropped the last pretense, he blurted. The main screen pulsed with a priority seal. The Cardinal's voice cut clean through the static. Industrial Sector Gamma Charlie, he called. Orbital Command reports widespread infiltration. Bunkers have enacted self-purges under insufficient verification, squandering assets. New directive. Within 1 standard cycle of receipt, each chaplain will transmit a roster of verified personnel and a log of measures taken. Any bunker that cannot provide proof of thorough verification by that time will be classified compromised. Orbital cleansing will follow. No appeals. Marshal out. The message repeated once, then vanished. 1 cycle, Chip muttered. With lag, that window already shrank. I heard him. He wants paperwork, Chip went on. Rights described, boxes ticked, names marked. Proof you did everything he would have done if he'd been here. He wants a reason to feel holy while he drops plasma, I said. Chip looked at me. What do we do? What's left, I answered. I returned to the barracks. Conversations stuttered and broke as I entered. New directive, I said. Command gave us a deadline. Within 1 cycle, I must sign this bunker pure. If I can't, they'll wipe this sector from orbit. They'll what? Kesh called. Orbital plasma, I said. Our walls won't matter. Disbelief, cursing, bitter laughter, noise rolled and tangled. So we either let you cut us again, Stern called, and some die, or we refuse and all die. There's another path, Kesh said louder. You lie. Heads turned his way. You own the seal, he went on. You write the log. Tell the Cardinal every man knelt, every bowl behaved, every infected burned. He can't read us from above. And if he sends inspection, Stern snapped. He won't send a team into a bunker he already flagged for fire, Kesh replied. This ultimatum's a sorter. Either we show him a neat ledger or we become a crater. There's no inspection line on that tree. Stross murmured, he may be right. You want me to falsify a purity roll? I asked. I want to keep breathing, Kesh replied. Dress it how you like in your ledger. Lies rot souls, Stern cut in. We twist the rights, the corruption deepens. You think the Cardinal cares if he burns liars or honest men? Kesh asked. He cares about column totals. We're just figures on a slate. The only shepherd in this bunker stands right there holding a bowl. He jabbed a thumb at me. Enough, I said. We don't have hours to waste feuding. Here's what happens. 1 final round of verification. I'll adjust the rights to cut noise. Any man whose behavior sets teeth on edge goes through deeper scrutiny. When we finish, I send a report that satisfies command. You'll adjust the rights, Bran echoed. How? The reagent strength, I answered. Some violent reactions came from the mix drowning in minor contaminants. I'll thin it. Good phrase, Kesh muttered. Means you're scared of your own tool. It means the test's too twitchy, Bran said. He wants to narrow its trigger. Stern's gaze locked on me. You plan to water holy work. I plan to make it readable, I said. You saw what happened when we treated every swirl as damnation. Callan lies cold because of that. You're rewriting doctrine, Stern accused. I'm using judgment, I replied, which is what I'm here for. He stared at me for a long heartbeat. You're compromising. Yes. I didn't soften it. Between killing all of you and letting this thing stroll through unchecked, that compromise wears the title chaplain. Kesh's mouth twitched. Almost sounds like you remember you're human. Stern looked to Stross. And you stand behind this. Stross met his gaze. I stand behind wanting as many of you upright as I can get. If the chaplain can thread that, I won't cut his line. Stern's fists clenched. You betray the creed. You insist on a reading that turns rights into a firing squad, I said. He stepped closer. Start with me then. Put my blood in your softened bowl. If it stays calm, your compromise holds. If it jumps, you still have one fanatic to shoot. Kesh let out a short laugh. For once, I like his thinking. Stern glared, then thrust out his hand toward me. Test me. I studied him. His eyes shone. Not fear. Hunger for vindication. As you wish. We set the bowl on a crate in the barracks center. Men formed a ring. Stross took a place at my shoulder. Bran watched from the edge. I uncapped the reagent and let only a thin film spread along the bowl's bottom. Enough to answer a real intrusion. Less likely to thrash at every speck of dust. The manual calls for more, Stern muttered. The manual never watched this thing crawl through a man's neck, I said. Adjusting is survival work, not rebellion. He offered his palm. I drew the blade across it, opening a shallow cut. Blood dripped into the bowl. It spread and deepened the red. For a moment the surface lay quiet. A murmur ran through the circle. Stern stared down, then up at me. You see, clean. He turned to show the others his bleeding hand like a banner. I kept my eyes on the bowl. For several heartbeats, nothing moved. Then a thin filament of darker red appeared near the rim. It wove through the mixture, faint as a hair. Bran stiffened. There. Stern pivoted back, sharp eyes narrowing. I tipped the bowl, letting the liquid slide. The filament stretched into a thread, then snapped back into the film. It looked small, subtle. Nothing like Dervik's riot. You can call that noise, Kesh said, or we can assume the thing learned to whisper. Every gaze swung to me. My heart hammered, my face stayed blank. Callan's empty skull pressed at the back of my thoughts. Radek's warped frame, Dervik's last grin. If I named Stern infected, I'd have to kneel him at the plate. If I declared this noise, I'd keep a zealot in the ranks and risk him sparking more deaths. Stern met my eyes. You know my loyalty. I know your fervor, I said. Loyalty's trickier. You doubt me. I doubt everyone. He took a step toward the plate. If you suspect, don't hesitate. That's what you taught us. That's what the Cardinal said. Doubt kills. Purity needs sacrifice. If my death proves the rites still work, I'll kneel. He meant it. He'd die for the story. The entity's bargain echoed in my skull. You decide what is pure. Stern stood there bleeding, eager. That filament clung to the bowl. Kesh watched, wanting a cleansing. The zealots watched, needing reassurance the rites worked even on their own. Every angle cut. If I put Stern down, I removed the loudest voice cheering for more executions. I'd satisfy Kesh's camp. I'd show the zealots that even their champion fell under scrutiny. Convenient. Too convenient. If I spared him, I risked a fanatic, who might already carry a quiet infection, dragging other chaplains into self-purge later. I realized and hated that part of me wanted him to die because he made my work harder, not because of the filament. That made him, in that moment, dangerous in a way the entity could easily exploit. You're hesitating, Stern whispered. That thing crawled into you too. It crawled into all of us, I said. Some parts welcome it more than others. I set the bowl down. Stern, I said. Step onto the plate. He exhaled once, shoulders loosening as if in relief. Thank you. You still don't know what I'll do. I know you'll do what's needed. He walked to the devotional plate and knelt facing the saint's halo. Blood dripped from his palm onto iron. The ring of men tightened. I joined him, drew my pistol. This was less judgment than administration, less doctrine than risk calculus. The creed pretended to float above such things. Reality dragged it back to earth. Stern, I said, your zeal never wavered. Your faith may outlast mine. That alone doesn't make you safe. It makes you volatile. If I'm volatile toward the enemy, good, he replied. You've also been volatile toward your brothers, I went on. You pressed them toward death to prove belief. You swung my authority as a cudgel. You called doubt a stain instead of a warning. You're killing me for arguing, he snapped. I'm killing you because your fire will push this bunker into self-destruction faster than any quiet host, I said. Because the right shows a trace, and your behavior amplifies it. Because if I spare you and you turn, you'll tear us apart from the inside. You twist doctrine, he hissed. I use it. I fired. The bolt slammed through his skull. He slid forward onto the saint's halo. No strange movement followed, no second voice, just silence. I holstered the pistol. You chose, Kesh murmured behind me. Not because the bowl ordered it, but because you weighed cost. I glanced at the bowl. The filament had collapsed into the red. I couldn't pick it out anymore. I wasn't sure whether it had ever been anything but my own need to see something there. We logged the verification. Names, times, procedures. I dictated the litany, the adjusted reagent measure, the list of hosts identified and eliminated. I omitted Callan's clean autopsy. I omitted false alarms. On record, every man I'd shot carried clear contagion, by right or by manifest mutation. Chip sent the report on a secure band. It's out, he said. System took it. Any reply? Too much chatter. Nothing yet. But they heard us. Good. Stross leaned in the doorway. You think they'll accept it? They want to, I said. Units that solve problems without crying for help make their lives tidy. If they discover the gaps later, he asked, they'll be busy with other fires. I looked at Chip. You were in the alcove doorway when the thing bargained. He flinched. I heard enough. We blew that host, I said. We did. You believe we erased it? He stared at the console. We shredded one cluster, maybe more that touched it. I don't know if it keeps a central core or scatters itself. I don't know if that blast mattered beyond ending Dervik's pain. Honest, Stross muttered, short on comfort. As I reached the threshold, Chip spoke again. It liked your line, he said, about faith structures. I stopped. You heard that, I said. In the alcove. Reminded me of one of your early sermons, he added, on the transport. You told us faith wasn't a wall, it was a bridge. I liked that. I don't recall using that here, I lied. I do, he replied, faint smile on his lips. Our eyes met in the glow of the consoles. Nothing unnatural showed there, just a tired man. I'm glad you're still with us, he said. We'd have torn ourselves apart without you. I left before I answered. Days blurred, bombardment thinned. Distant rumbles shifted tone. Either the war had moved on, or we'd fallen off the map. Then the outer doors shook under a new impact. We scrambled to firing positions. Sappers checked charges. Guns came up. A coded knock rang on the inner door. 3 heavy blows. Pause. 2 more. Stross eased his rifle down a fraction. Friendly pattern. We cracked the door. Outside stood a squad in fresh armor, helmets gleaming, insignia unscarred. Behind them, through the narrow gap, I glimpsed armored transports and the hazy skeleton of the foundry's upper works, blasted yet upright. A man in ornate armor stepped forward, helm under his arm. His breastplate bore a war church sigil. A chain of office hung across his chest. Chaplain Ignatius Hex, he greeted me. Deacon Marcus Hesh, Sector Inspection Corps. Your report claims successful containment of Xenos infiltration. It does. We're here to extract your verified personnel and decommission the bunker. He stepped inside, eyes sweeping the barracks. Your methods will inform future protocols. He looked over the men. You look like hell, he observed, but you endured. Creed holds. The troopers stared at his polished armor and clean boots. Kesh's mouth twisted. Stross's face didn't move. We endured, I said. During the inspection, Hesh pressed for details on the rights. I gave him the log version. I spoke of confident tests, clear reactions, decisive executions. No mention of diluted mixes, false positives, or bargains on tables. He listened with eager interest. "Impressive," he said. "Many chaplains panicked, ordered full purges. You balanced caution and zeal. Rare gift." "You've only read the survivors' logs," I replied. "The dead can't annotate their mistakes." "Outcomes speak," he countered. "You preserved a fighting core. That proves enough." In the medici alcove, a fresh plate covered the blast crater. Brand's tools hung clean and orderly. Hesh tapped the plate with his knuckles. "Your encounter with the entity here fascinates the Cardinal. A talking parasite. How did it sound?" "Hungry," I said. He chuckled. "As do all enemies. Our church is pleased, Hex. Your rites will shape the next wave. We'll standardize them for future campaigns." "Standardize," I repeated. "We need tools, not improvisations," he said, clapping my shoulder. "You've given us a start." He moved on. I lingered at the plate a moment longer. He didn't understand that every rite in that bunker had been improvisation, that each decision came stitched with guilt. Those crooked choices would be flattened into neat steps and sent out with stamps of approval. Extraction felt small. We filed out through the bunker's arch, beneath chipped saints, past the scars of old fusillades. Men squinted in the foundry's light. Dust swirled in plumes from transport thrusters. I'd almost forgotten the feel of air that didn't bounce off low ceilings. Transports lined the edge, ramps lowered. Fresh troops moved in, hauling supplies and salvage. Chip walked ahead of me with a crate of Vox components. His shoulders sat looser than I'd ever seen. He glanced back. "Did you think we'd actually leave that hole?" he asked. "No. Me either," he grinned. "Maybe the saints enjoy jokes." We boarded. The compartment smelled of metal and oil. No built-up sweat, no old propellant. The air felt clean. Seats lined the walls. Troopers strapped in, some with weary groans, some with furtive smiles. Kesh dropped into a sling and shut his eyes. Stross sat straight-backed, helmet in his lap, gaze moving. Across from me, Chip buckled himself in and leaned forward on his knees. Out of habit, I reached for my rosary. He watched the beads slip through my fingers. "There's a line from your first homily with us," he mused. "You probably forgot it, on the transport before we saw the foundry." "I doubt it was memorable," I said. "You told us war compresses men into shapes they wouldn't recognize in peacetime," he went on. "That faith was the only lattice that could keep us from splintering under pressure." I frowned. "That doesn't sound like one of mine." "Oh, it was. You talked about ore in a furnace. Heat and hammers driving out dross as long as we trusted the process. Otherwise we shattered." I had used that metaphor once, years back, on a different set of recruits. I'd dropped it after the first real battle made it feel obscene. I had never given that talk to this unit. "I don't remember sharing that with this squad," I said carefully. "Maybe you did somewhere along the way," he replied. "You talk a lot, Chaplain." He smiled. Something in the angle of that smile, the relaxed eyes, the cadence of his words brushed the same note the entity had struck when it praised our faith structure. "You listen closely," I observed. "I listen to everything," he said. "Occupational hazard." The transport rumbled as engines spooled. Harnesses clinked. Men shifted. "You were in the alcove doorway," I reminded him, "when Dervik changed." He grimaced. "Hard image to scrub." "You caught some of him on you." "More than a little," he admitted. "Brand told me to scrub. I scrubbed. If anything settled in me, your rights would have sniffed it out." I thought of the faint filament in his test. How easily I could have missed it, or imagined it. "Perhaps," I murmured. "You don't trust your own rights," he said. "I trust them as much as any field tool cobbled together under shelling," I answered. He laughed. "Fair." The transport lifted. Pressure pushed us into our seats. Through a narrow view slit, the foundry dropped away. The bunker disappeared into metal and smoke. We rose toward the blockade. Promotion came mid-transit, wrapped in solemn phrases. A message from the Cardinal's office praised courage, doctrinal creativity, balance between zeal and caution. It named me an example of chaplaincy in crisis. It requested I debrief other priests on the rites of verification I'd pioneered. The irony settled like grit. Deacon Hesh visited my quarters on the staging station. The room was small, clean, bare walls. My rites book lay on the desk beside a blank slate and a carafe of water. Hesh tapped the book. "Your notes on verification already circulate," he said. "The Cardinal is pleased. Few can claim to have stared this thing down and walked out with a functional unit." "I didn't walk out untouched," I replied. "No one expects you to." He smiled. "We expect usefulness. You qualify. We're sending you to a training camp on the inner moon. Fresh recruits, young chaplains. You'll demonstrate the rites. Show them how to separate loyal men from hidden threats. You don't worry that teaching these methods also teaches the entity how to dodge them?" I asked. "Dodge. It adapted to our tools," I said, "to our prayers and reagents. It stole our language. The more we standardize, the easier its work becomes." He waved a hand. "You attribute depth to mindless corrosion. Parasites imitate. They can't grasp the creed's heart. They mimic sounds, not meaning." In the alcove, it turned my own words about faith back on me, I said. It grasped enough to debate. "Men twist doctrine to excuse themselves daily," he replied. "That doesn't make doctrine weaker. It means we wield it with more discipline." He set a data slate on the desk. "Your schedule, lectures, liturgy reviews, interviews. You'll stay occupied." "I'm still marked with the dead," I murmured. "That's what proves you valuable," he said. He left. I sat on the bunk and stared at the schedule. Names of camps, session titles, hours allotted to teaching purity. I had killed a deserter who'd seen true danger first. I had killed a loyal veteran at a bowls twitch. I'd kept a living host breathing long enough to hear the enemy's bargain. I had shot a zealot as much for morale as for a faint ripple. I had lied to command about results. Now those decisions would turn into lesson plans. I opened the rites book to the blank pages reserved for field amendments. In narrow script I wrote, "In engagements involving shape-adaptive Xenos infiltration, no single ritual procedure holds absolute reliability. Verification rests in judgment, not repetition. Test results must be read alongside behavior, prior confession, and potential fallout. The chaplain bears full responsibility for every life ended and every life spared under his seal." I paused, then added, "And no chaplain should trust that any measure has fully erased the threat. Purity at the front is a temporary state." I closed the book. The training camp sprawled across dust near the inner moon's equator. Barracks, drill yards, range pits. Recruits marched in lockstep. Chaplains in fresh robes walked among them, book and pistol at their belts, icons bright. I stood on a low platform at the parade ground's edge before a semicircle of newly ordained priests, slates ready, pens poised. "In the bunker," I told them, "we faced an entity that wore our dead and preyed on our fear of contamination. The worst damage came not only from the creature, but from our own willingness to kill each other based on shaky signs." I held up a bowl identical to the one I'd used below, this one polished, inscriptions crisp. "This is a tool," I said, "not a miracle. Treat its answers with respect and caution. Consider each man you test before you condemn him to the plate, and accept that you will misjudge." A young chaplain raised his hand. "If command orders full purge without clear proof?" "You'll have to choose which command you serve," I answered. "The one that counts bodies, or the one that weighs souls?" "That skirts heresy," another muttered. "It might," I said. "Conscience and heresy often wear similar cloaks." Uneasy laughter flickered around the ring. After the lecture they broke into clusters, arguing in low voices. Some would listen. Some would cling to simple answers. The entity, wherever it hid, would adapt to either. I stepped down and walked along the yard's edge. Near the Vox Tower, a familiar frame leaned against a crate, talking with signal trainees. Tall, thin, burn scar on his hand. Chip. He dismissed the trainees with a nod as I approached. They trotted off. "Chaplain," he greeted me, "settling into your new life as legend." "Legend?" "They told the recruits you purified a bunker alone," he said with a grin. I didn't correct them. Seemed unkind. "They forgot Stross, Kesh, Bran, every man who died." "They forgot them," he said. "You remember." We stood side by side watching recruits jog past. Their voices rose and fell in a dull chant. "You ever want to tell them what it really looked like?" he asked. "The mess." "If I poured everything out," I said, "half of them would use it as license to improvise worse. The other half would seize up, waiting for a miracle. Neither helps." "So you give them a trim truth," he said. "I give them what they can carry without dropping it on someone." He nodded. His eyes slid to the bowl in my hand. "I've been turning your reagent over in my head," he said. "The way it shifted from violent to subtle. Adaptation, you called it. I did. Imagine training it." His tone stayed speculative. "Shaping its reactions to certain patterns. Teaching it to recognize specific arrangements instead of screaming at everything. A taught dog instead of a feral one." "The thing you want to detect will study alongside us," I replied. "It'll watch every adjustment and learn how to slip between teeth." "Perhaps," he smiled. "Perhaps we can still stay one step ahead." "Do you believe that?" I asked. "I believe in trying," he said. His eyes brightened. "Do you still hear it?" I asked quietly. The other voice. "Hear what?" "The adaptation pattern. The hitchhiker." He chuckled. "You think it lives in me." "I think it brushed you," I answered. "In that corridor, during the tests. Our rights might have missed a strand." He studied my face. "If it did," he said, "what then?" "I'd shoot you eventually," I answered, "before you walked out of here with a squad of fresh hosts, but only after I was sure." "And if you never reach shore?" he asked. "Then I live with the risk," I said, "as I do now." He nodded slowly. "You're more honest than most priests." "And you're more elusive than most Vox-men," I replied. He laughed. "Want a confession?" he asked. "Right here, no booth." "Yes," I said. He drew a breath, then let it out. "I confess that when that thing spoke through Dervik, part of me recognized its hunger," he said. "Not because I'm alien, but because I've listened to command for years. Their hunger isn't so different. They crave obedience and clean reports and stories that fit. The entity's hunger felt straightforward. That frightened me." "That's clarity, not invasion," I told him. "Then I confess that sometimes when I hear the liturgy now, I also hear that layered tone underneath," he went on. "Not in the air, in my head. It offers counterpoints. It makes jokes." "Does it argue for survival?" I asked. "It argues for exploiting blind spots," he said, "for turning fear of impurity into a lever." "Do you act on it?" "Sometimes," he shrugged. "I listen to you and to myself too. Many voices. One skull." We watched the drills in silence. "If you are carrying it," I said, "you're very skilled at appearing human." "I started human," he replied. "Anything else rides my habits." "That's not how most parasites describe themselves." "I told you, it's crowded." He glanced at the bowl. "You could test me again," he said. "Here, now, see if you like the shapes this time." I looked at the metal, at my reflection warped in its curve. "No," I said. "I've killed enough men on the strength of that bowl. If I ever shoot you, it won't be because a fluid rippled. It'll be because I watched you endanger the people around you." "Practical," he said. "Cowardly. You judge yourself hard." "I have to. No one else saw everything that happened down there." He fell quiet. Recruits finished their run. Instructors shouted. Lines broke for mess and showers. The camp looked orderly, clean, controlled. I knew how thin that veneer ran. One infection, one overzealous chaplain, one misread bowl, and the neat lines would become another bunker. "You ever think of walking away?" Chip asked. "Find some forgotten rock with nothing worth invading. Let this machine grind without us." "Desertion," I said. "You shot the last deserter who tried," he replied. "Radek. Remember him?" "I do." "If I ran," he asked, "would you shoot me?" "Yes," I said, "because I refuse to shoulder this alone." He smiled, small and tired. "Fair." The sun over the horizon hung low and red in dust, staining the camp in rust before sinking. A bell rang, calling the evening litany. Chaplains drifted toward the chapel. I stayed where I was. "You coming?" Chip asked. "In a moment," I said. He nodded and walked off, hands in his pockets, shoulders loose. Dust curled around his boots. I watched until the chapel door closed behind him. My hand tightened around the bowl. In the light, small imperfections in the metal warped the reflections. If I focused, I could almost read movement in them, lines that looked like letters, shapes twitching just under the sheen. I knew that trick. Guilt and memory made ghosts out of light. Even so, I turned the bowl upside down and set it in the dust. The inscriptions pressed a faint ring into the ground. New chaplains would receive bright copies. They'd fill them, cut palms, sing verses. Men would kneel on plates. Some would die for cause. Some because fluid twitched when no one could explain why. The entity would adjust. So would we. My task wasn't to end it. That much had become clear. My task was to walk the narrow space between, to choose again and again whose lives to end and whose to risk, knowing each choice fattened something. Creed, parasite, or both. The bell rang again. I picked up the inverted bowl, brushed dust from its rim, and walked toward the chapel to teach more men how to judge each other with tools that did not deserve their faith.